when I joined the company, I was like, to be honest, I was like, not sure if this is the kind of company I want to work for.
With my own work, I've had a background in education, in advertising, in tech, in the arts, and been able to bring all of those together because it started by being able to recognise patterns. What are the connections between these different ways that I express myself? So I could be, I could be an artist, I could be an entrepreneur, I could be a car driver, I'm all these different things. And looking for what's the connection of how I express myself, so what's my story and what's my relationship then, because once I have a better understanding of my own story within that environment, I can then have a very personal relationship with the piece of technology.
And that's why I like to say everything in tech now is narrative design, because you're negotiating, you're sort of choosing your own nodes of relationship to the thing. You're looking for the pattern. You're looking to repeat that pattern. You're figuring out what the end-to-end story is.
But it starts with the individual and then it goes into the bigger piece of culture. So for me, culture is collective storytelling. And it gets to the point of, how does my story fit into the cultures that I choose to find myself in or I am already immersed in? What's the gap between the stories, the external stories, and the internal behaviour? And that's when you start on a very personal level or an organisational level to look at how can we start to bridge some of those gaps. Because when you do that, you then start to bring in other perspectives, an understanding of how you can start to use the technologies, and I'm not just talking digital, technology is a bigger concept than that, but how you can start to use all of those to change the future and create the futures we want.
Yes.
I think you're onto something, because I mean that storytelling, I mean, to me that translates into purpose. It translates into having a clarity, and that makes you attractive in a collaborative environment. If you have a strong purpose, if you know why you're doing things, then it's easier for others to interact with you. And a statement
of intention.
I think individuals and organizations need to be very clear. Where are we going? Where are we heading? And I think at Scania we've come a long way in figuring that purpose and direction. Why are we doing things? And I think that's attracting partners. That's creating that collaborative environment.
But I also think, like, on the other hand, like just thinking about the identity that you're talking about in collaboration, I think it forces us to have to know who we are, like from the beginning, which makes
and
it
that's not
really
very
hard.
That's not really comfortable for some people. Some people don't give themselves permission to go down that path of actually looking at it.
So it creates like a longer path to, like, who am I, where do I want to go, where do I want to end, who do I need in order for me to get to where I want to be. Kind of.
I mean, in order to create the future, we need to collaborate. One person or one company cannot change the world, but everyone needs to collaborate and find those partnerships, but also the win-win situations. Everyone who's collaborating needs to win, and that's a tricky bit.
For me, when we're talking about collaboration, especially in the tech space, I think that we're looking at the collaboration of the technologies. So you can't look at technology in isolation anymore, but also the collaboration of the people who are developing it. I think there needs to be a diversity of the skill set that are developing the tech, but also in terms of what's the output. So the automotive industry should work with architects and neuroscientists and everybody. I think that it needs to be a bigger conversation. I'm not saying that's easy, but I think that in the way that we are moving forward, or the way that we need to move forward in order to have a sustainable planet and sustainable businesses, I think that that's where we need to start those conversations.
The autonomous part that I'm working on as my day job, it's not the technology only, it means a shift in the way transportation is being done. And it also means a major change in the ecosystem and the business model side, which means that there's a lot of disciplines that needs to come together, not just autonomous technology, but as you mentioned before, the architects, the city planners, the business side, etc. And all of those needs to form that collaborative environment, solving one common problem.
What I'm seeing now is that the different types of technology have become commoditized, that everybody has access to them. Everybody's a storyteller, everybody's a designer. And so there seems to be this groundswell of people looking for something bigger than themselves. And my question is that how can we harness this collective intelligence? You know, this divine, if we're looking at religion, this divine intelligence that comes from wherever, to actually work together to try and change and create the futures that we want, that are long-term. I think that you know, the brave, smart organisations are the ones who are saying we don't know, but we're going to put our money where our mouth is and actually start to do some research and ask questions and not think that we've only got the best people internally in our organisation. We have to go outside and we have to ask questions and we have to investigate.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things that when I joined the company, I was like, to be honest, I was like, not sure if this is the kind of company I want to work for, because I realised that, okay, what does it do to the climate and all that kind of stuff? But when you start realising that I actually have a say and I can do something to change the way we work, and also my passion is with people, like how can I empower more people? So that's one of the things I get to work with, which I absolutely love now, and just using everyone's talents in the best possible way, and also realizing that we have skill sets that might be underutilized. So how can we use everyone across the entire company to come up with new ideas that will revolutionize the transport system, the entire society, essentially. Like, that's what we're trying to do, which is really, really fun.
How can we sustainably use every part of a person?
Exactly, every single part.
That's the interpersonal bit, because we are empowering people by showing them that we trust and respect and value their contribution, and that's where, you know, innovation starts to happen from the bottom up.
But I think one key aspect is most people understand why they started a typical job, but very seldom, even after 10 years, people don't know why they're still doing that job. So I think interacting with everyone and saying, is this still okay for you? Is this still your dream? Are you doing what you really want to do?
And I think it's helpful then when you have an organisation that's quite fluid in allowing people, enabling people to have a check-in with themselves and say, is this still the place that I want to be? Am I still working towards my own goals and stories, and does that fit in?
And are the compasses, the personal and the organization's compass, are they pointing in the same direction?
But in an organization of 52,000 people, how do you make those cultural decisions about whose voices get priority, or whose consensus is ideal?
This is a tricky one.
Yeah, it is.
But I think it starts with respect, and then it comes into democracy. I think we have a very strong foundation in democracy and the thinking that everyone's opinion is relevant and we are equal, etc. I think that's where it starts. Respect and democracy.
There are so many different definitions and understanding of what democracy is. So as a starting point, maybe it's working out what the lexicon is first. What's the language, the shared language and the shared understanding of that language.
Everyone might be saying the same word and having a different definition.
But it's just like the word innovation. You know, I could ask you what innovation means and everybody would have a different definition, but we'd all be kind of, this is what I mean by it. And I think that it is starting...
That common language is very important.
What I really like is Umar Haque wrote the Betterness Manifesto. And so when I've worked with organisations, it's helping them to write a Betterness Manifesto and not just a vision statement. Because the Betterness Manifesto is, how are you going to make the lives of your employees better? How are you going to make the lives of your customers better? How are you going to make society better? And everybody feels a sense of connection to that. An article I read the other day actually flipped that a little bit and said, rather than making a statement, have a question. It's a vision question. So everybody at every point of the day thinks, how am I working towards this? How am I working towards answering that? Because that's when you can start to have collaboration. Because as we alluded to earlier, we can't solve things on our own. And so we need to be able to ask questions to help get to that point. And for me, I think that's how I see collaboration.
Is that shared goal, that shared vision, solving one problem or several problems? But it's also a very creative process where everyone is contributing with their various assets. It's that process of co-creating that common solution to the problem and making sure that everyone contributes and everyone feels part of the team.
And I think adding to that is that it's about an organisation that recognises human potential. So your measures of success are not just commercial. It's also about helping people recognise and strive for their potential personally and professionally, because then people feel that they've got a vested interest. And they are more likely to come together to want to try and collaborate.
One of the things that I see in my work, working with startups and entrepreneurs, is exactly that people are like, oh no, I'm not going to choose that company because they don't care about me. Like, it's all about the money, which you totally understand. And I know a lot of organizations say that, okay, our biggest assets are our people. Yeah, you don't translate it into like what you're actually doing. Because if you go back to like the core of a business, like you need to make money, obviously. But how are you going to do that if you don't have the people?
Yes, with a relationship to themselves, their story, their purpose. It sounds like it all comes together in that way.
But the profit is just a result.
Exactly.
It starts with something different. It starts with the people. It starts with the mission. It starts with something that defines that company, etc. And then you get the profit as a result. The profit is not the target.
Yeah.
That's the result.